hyperscale expansion and edge builds have taken the data center business global. Maturation in the US and Europe have also made Asia a more strategic place for players to operate in. Joining me now in Infrastructure 2020 is Chris Streets, Managing Director and Head of Data Centers for JLL, an expert in the Asia Pacific region. Chris, thanks so much for talking to me. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person as well. It's been a long time in the making, even before COVID, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I hope you're doing well.
Yeah,
Let's talk about the next frontier. What is the next big geography for data centers?
Well, I think across the Asia Pacific region is that there's a couple different areas that are really coming into their own. And those revolve around kind of I'll say two main buckets. First, you have the second cities, and so places like the Osaka and Melbourne's, and it's not really a second city within the country, but Seoul as being kind of that next wave. And then you've got other regional markets like ASEAN that are really exploding, and what we're seeing is just pure growth and from all aspects of digital infrastructure. Obviously data centers being one of those, but you're seeing it in subsea builds, you're seeing it in terrestrial fiber.
So, and what you'd say, in Europe, if you want to go with an operator and you want to spread across several geographies, you can kind of navigate. There are some jurisdiction problems and not problems, but struggles, especially when it comes to languages. How does that compare to Asia? Is it difficult to go across borders with different nations?
Yeah, when we talk with a lot of the different operators and even investors, right, that are looking to place with specific operators, every country's its own unique challenges and opportunities that come with those challenges. But it's all vastly different. So whether it comes down to the details of things like permitting process, just not only time, but who to speak to and how the process evolves or what the steps in the process are, that's vastly different in Ho Chi Minh versus a Manila versus a Bangkok. There's different players involved, there's different aspects of the government agencies. Obviously things like utility, the telco environment, the consistency that you do see across is with the customer base, specifically within the hyperscalers. Now, the main difference across the region there is that you'll see in ASEAN, you've got two legs of growth or two vectors of growth, both the US or Western hyperscalers plus the Chinese. And then in some of the other regions, you get a bit different challenges there.
Okay, I was actually going to ask you to maybe give us a snapshot of who's buying what around Asia. So like, let's do a lease versus build quick snapshot.
Sure.
Between more mature markets in Asia and especially Southeast Asia as well. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so it's a bit different. I've listened to some of the panels here talk about like North America and the move. The whole move.
I just had a chat about that.
Yeah, around the whole move, like they're just build operate themselves, and in Asia they are doing that in certain markets, some of the US hyperscalers that have scale, but they're doing it for completely different reasons. And the reason that they're having to do it in some of these markets is because there's not an existing stock of co-location that meets their requirements and at the scale. And so when they look at a time to market, going in and being able to do that themselves. Now they're using different strategies in order to do that, because it's not a pure, where they've been successful, it's not a pure kind of build it themselves. They typically bring in a partner at the PropCo level.
If I gave you $1 billion right now, where would you put the money in Asia?
I think I would stick pretty close to my home in Southeast Asia. I think across that there's obviously it's a little higher up on the risk curve, but the overall potential for growth and what we're seeing at both from the Western hyperscalers and the Chinese gives it a lot of depth and longevity in terms of kind of the growth patterns.
Okay, and then of course. So we are in Toronto at a conference, and a lot of the conversation has been around that overflow into tier 2 cities and proximity areas. In Asia, the movement is slightly different because it's a different stage of maturation of the market. But the other big topics really are the challenges, the geopolitical challenges, the economic challenges that the world is facing, and it's going to face over the next few months. How do you see that playing out within the Asian data center market? So I'm talking about recessions, inflations, energy crisis. anything?
Yeah, so, Asia isn't immune from the macro kind of global environment, right? We're seeing the rise of the interest rates, which is putting pressure in, but on our space and our sector. The reality, though, is that there's so much capital out there coming from different sources. Where 3-5 years ago, a lot of it was from the growth private equity kind of classic stage, but now you've got full entrance within the pension funds, right? You've got sovereign wealth funds, you've got family offices, and so that really counters a lot of those kind of macro challenges. Now on the geopolitical, right, is we can talk about interest rates and all that, but armies matter sometimes, and so that is, I'll say, dampening some of the markets, both from the two largest markets in terms of demographics in Asia is China and India, obviously. And so those two alone, each have their own challenges in terms of content or data privacy and security laws in the case of China, and how that's excluded some of the Western the Western hyperscalers content have decided not to go into China. In India, you've got a classic kind of geopolitical situation there with armies still on the borders, and so the Chinese have really, where they entered the market several years ago, have really kind of put the brakes on further deployment, at least at this point, right? And that may evolve itself. But other kind of more pragmatic issues that we face in the sector is around power. You're seeing similar issues all across the markets or across the region in terms of utility delivering power in a somewhat timely manner. Places like Tokyo and to a lesser extent Osaka, but primarily in the Tokyo metro, you're seeing what's transitioned from, say, a 48-month kind of cycle for delivery of power to 60 months. So 5 years is a long time to wait to get power at scale.
Especially at the rates of digital adoption.
Exactly, and so that's put a premium on either developers who have land with the appropriate zoning and use permits. That also has guaranteed power from TEPCO. That's put a premium on it. It still hasn't, there's still a lot of growth. You see it both in Enzai and in Western Tokyo. In Singapore, we're going through a moratorium right now. We're coming out of the back end of that. The government's put in a pilot program, and so we're going to see hopefully some of those get awarded later this year, early next year. And so that'll be an interesting dynamic to see what happens next, right? There's not really a lot of visibility from the government in terms of what happens after this initial pilot phase. And so that will be interesting to see, because that dynamic, that moratorium is put into the Singapore market, has created a lot of overflow demand either in Johor Bahru in Malaysia, and also in Batam, which is Indonesia.
Yeah. Okay. A lot to dissect there.
Yes.
I'll get into the moratoriums in a second.
Okay.
Just picking up on what you said about armies matter, the world's eyes are really on Hong Kong and Taiwan, and Chinese movements there. Have you seen operators, and Hong Kong is kind of a saturated market anyway, but especially in Taiwan, have you seen within the work that you do, operators becoming a bit more uncertain about deploying? Are they delaying decisions? Have the industry there kind of stalled a little bit because of what's been happening?
Yeah, I don't think so. This, and I say that a bit guarded, because I hear
like that.
I hear that, and it would be my kind of intuition that would be the case. But what we're seeing is people announce and continued growth, and even Hong Kong, right? Like, everybody wrote it off, but there's been, if you look at the transactions this year, there's been several transactions that have been very notable, and there's a continued growth. And what we're seeing from both the interconnection market, but also the financial services, which is a huge kind of enterprise customer within or segment within the Hong Kong market, we're seeing them significant kind of deployment still, even though some of the people are moving from Hong Kong, the systems are staying. And in Taiwan, I think it's a much even though it's an important market and it's got a strong and deep, long-standing kind of technical manufacturing base, right, going back decades with the semiconductors and such, the colo segment sector has been relatively new. Right, I think AWS, when I was there decades ago, 10 years ago, we set up an edge POP there, but they haven't moved into kind of core compute. You've seen the announcement from Microsoft bring Azure there. Google's been there a long time in southern Taiwan. Yeah, and so it's there, but the co-location sector itself is relatively thin. There's some new players coming into the market. There's definitely some rumors that I'm hearing on the M&A side that are pretty imminent. So I think there's going to be it'll rise up in visibility, and again, it's widespread growth all across APAC.
That's interesting. And then, so moratoriums.
Yeah.
Do we expect? Of course, Singapore went through what Singapore went through and is still going through it. Do we expect to see that happening in other places of Asia, especially Seoul? There's been some rumors as well around Seoul maybe imposing some moratoriums.
Yeah, I think we will, and it really comes down to a couple different things, right? Is that the digital infrastructure space and data centers in particular are viewed as both a very positive kind of indication of ongoing kind of digital infrastructure and digital services for citizens, but they also make easy targets because one building is a very functional building, but all of a sudden it's taking up as much electricity capacity as a very large residential area, and so from a political perspective, it makes a very easy target. With that said, right, we as an industry all owe it to ourselves and wider stakeholder community to make sure that we're delivering sustainable services across, and working with governments to really educate them on how the digital infrastructure sector really helps bring value to the citizenry, right? And we've seen that in the past 2 years. COVID kind of reinforced that when you saw all the governments introduce digital services to citizens for health care services and contact tracing to help with fighting the pandemic, and that can't happen without digital infrastructure. And the bits got to have a home. The home of the bits are the data centers. So that's how it all can work, but it does take time, right? In those discussions, you gotta take the good with the bad, but you've got to make a proactive approach to work with the governments to do that. And some of these, it's a brand new sector for some of these governments. They don't have a lot of history with it. It doesn't bring a lot of jobs directly, but the ecosystem that it builds from does bring a lot of jobs, right? From the wider kind of startup system and on the application development side. So.
Okay. Well, the beats have to have a home, and the home is the data center. I love that. That's a very good quote. Looking at JLL, you're one of the largest real estate advisory firms in the world. You've got a massive footprint in Asia. Yeah. What are you working on? What can we expect?
Yeah, so JLL, it's pretty exciting because we offer a full continuum of services across from capital markets to what we call work dynamics, which are project management, facility management services, and we also help end users and operators on their leasing side. So what our kind of primary challenge that we're seeing out in the market is really finding those opportunities on the operator side and working with the operators and bringing all the hundreds of people that we've got that are data center focused to bear on those problems. And it's challenge, right, is entering some of these new markets where you don't have a lot of transparency in terms of transaction. The permitting process is complex and varied. And so really helping, especially folks new to the region or new to the market, helping them kind of navigate that and solving problems.
So if we are looking to your next big announcement over the next 3 months, where is it going to come from? You need to mention the players. You can't mention players, I know that, but at least a bit of a geography that we can look into.
I think Southeast Asia, you'll see a few big pops in terms of new market entry. You're gonna, knock on wood, I think you're going to probably hear something in Taipei of an M&A. And I think there's probably some on the secondary markets of some privatization of taking public companies private. and probably China.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
And then just to close off, so as I said, we are Infrastructure 2022 by Structure Research. We're here in Toronto. What do you expect, when you come back in 12 months' time, what do you expect to have happened in the market? And that could either be Asia or it can be on a global scale. What's the one thing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's happening right now, especially when I come to places like Toronto here at this conference, is that people are just starting to learn about the Asia Pacific region and kind of opening, being more receptive to the idea of looking at investment opportunities there. And I think in the next 12 months we're going to see that shift. It's going to be all in, barring any huge macro events. But I think the long-term trends are just too compelling not to look at the Asia Pacific region.
Okay. Chris Street, Managing Director and Head of Data Center, so I don't want to forget the second part of the job title, at JLL. Thanks so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
As for your home, thank you for watching, and do check our website and give us a follow on social media for more breaking and timely news from across the digital infrastructure sector worldwide. At the Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.